good afternoon. I'm very happy to participate in this forum, and I just put together a few words. I'm the director of Kofi, and at Kofi Institute, there's a relief on a wall that reads, "Art is life." When I sat down to write this, I tried to remember what instigated my committing that slogan as a permanent fixture on a wall at the Institute. And I can only surmise it is a pervasive belief that I hold. So I decided here I would kind of think out loud with you and try to imagine what brought me to that conclusion. I know that there is an art to living, and I know that in living there's art. I decided too not to intellectualize my thoughts, but for fear of appearing too pedestrian, what I did do is go to Webster's dictionary and to find a definition of what is art. And I was pleasantly surprised when I read the definition. Essentially, the definition is all over the place. It started with art as an expression of human creative talent, especially in visual forms, painting and sculpture. Then it went on to the art of the Renaissance, modern art, children's art, art critic, historian, art lover, and then it continued naming other movements, surrealism, down to definition D, where it states a particular form or branch of expression, the art of dance, metalwork, the creative and performing arts, music, poetry, painting, dance. And then finally to E, subjects of study such as languages, literature, history, art subjects. And it started naming places and putting an emphasis on the idea of imaginative and creative activities, any skill that can be developed by practice. And I thought, phew, that's everything. That's absolutely everything. So I decided to stop there, and I went back to the wall, pre-dictionary, that influenced my thinking about art. And then, you know, art is that elusive but clearly distinguishable something that makes the ordinary seem somehow special. The art of writing, the art of cooking. Then I kind of regressed to childhood memories and remembered going to family reunions and knowing exactly whose peach cobbler I wanted to eat. You know, there'd be a selection of about 5 or 6. I'm sure Light Soup does the same thing. Art is dynamic. You know, it's life. And like culture, it's culture. And like culture, it's always changing and evolving. Then I thought, let me try to take a little journey back and think of moments in my life, one point to another, that somehow fixed my sense of art. You know, as a child, obviously, I thought art was just pretty things. Art was pretty things. I thought I was talking to myself. I thought, you know, my subconscious was kind of reverberating. I thought, wow. You know, any kind of pretty thing, colors that my friends and I could manage to make. High school offered a more formal explanation and introduced me to words like line and form and texture. And then as a young woman and a political activist, you know, the 60s introduced me to the school of Cuban graphic artists, and I was convinced then that the sole role of art was a revolutionary tool, a vehicle through which to educate the masses. Good pictures, clear message. University offered another experience, art history, a whole lexicon of European artists and their cultures and their history. And then finally at graduate school at the Kunstacademy in Germany, that experience exposed me to another. Oh, come on. Let me take this from me, please, because you're making me nervous. I'm going to start running on the chairs first. I'm talking to myself.
What about this one?
Anyway, what I was saying, the graduate school, you know, exposed me to another world of art, a whole modern European contemporary view, a kind of heavily intellectual and sometimes esoteric discourse that on occasion seemed to me a bit too heady and almost irrelevant. Nonetheless, what was clear to me is all these experiences were expanding the domain of the worlds of art. In conversation with a fellow panelist, I remember her quoting someone that I can only now paraphrase, and that is, art is the sum total of life, of experience. And then there was a period when I kind of transitioned from pure artist to artist educator. You know how artists are. If they're teaching, they always think they're teaching to support their art. And so I had to kind of confront myself in a particular phase of my life and see myself as artist educator. And in doing that, I began to work with another artist educator. We confronted ourselves with trying to understand, as artists, what did we bring to teaching. And my collaborator was an English landscape artist. And I essentially was a figurative graphic artist. And in our conversations, we resolved essentially that art was an attitude. And we asked ourselves, why did we think that? And we went back to think about how we learned to draw. And in learning to draw, you're always taught that essentially you don't really, a good art teacher helps you understand that you're never really making a mistake. If you put a line or a mark on a paper and you look at it and you think the line or the mark is where it should be, then you have an opportunity to reassess it. You know, the idea of reassessing, you know, it's a good attitude. We were taught never to think of ourselves as making mistakes. And I think that's a useful attitude to have in life. We also learn to value things, not only our tools, but to value people, to value ideas, to understand literally that a different point of view often has really a different perspective. And also you will learn something about the power of personal expression. You know, it's very humbling in class to be the most proficient in with the craft that you're, or the field that you're working in, and have someone else from the perspective, the sheer power of their personal voice and expression eclipse, you know, the fine technical work that you were able to achieve. Okay, so I just, to boil it down, I thought, you know, art is a product of something personal, really, and on the surface it doesn't have to seem necessarily very special. And living in Ghana brings the point home clearly to me that art is really all about life and the living people bring to it. And art is where we find it. Art provokes a feeling, yet it's not absolute. And this is the line I like best. It's really the spirit of the matter and the matter of spirit. And since I've been in Ghana, I've really learned that this place is exploding with the matter of spirit, and the spirit of matter is exploding with art. And to sum it up, I'd simply say that art is dynamic. It's a little bit like truth. Its meaning is found in its context, and it's found in the moment.
Thank you very much, Renee. And I think the mic is working, so Chairman.
I think Renee has put us in the right mood. She really has our minds completely open now to listen to the rest of the members of our panel. I'd like to call Mr. Jackson, who is a graduate student at Tech.
Good afternoon. I'm Bernard Akoi Jackson. I'm a graduate student at Tech offering painting and sculpture. I'm doing a master's in painting and sculpture. And a lot of people ask why painting and sculpture. And then we also, as Africans, would ask why separate the painting and sculpture in the first place? Because art is art. I found myself in my undergraduate bachelor's, I did painting, and then getting to the end of the course, I realized I was getting off the canvas. Painting was strictly meant for the canvas, but I found myself getting into abstraction and assemblages, and then suddenly I was off the canvas and my painting was in the open, and so I finally rested on installations. And so presently my drive is more towards installations. And installations are a sort of contemporary art form that brings odds and ends together. And Virginia Ryan would really be a true example, because she, for her work, her most recent work, where she went to Anamabu and collected trash and then made it gold for people to see. I mean, that is the idea of installations. But installation art is also conceptual. And with my art, I sort of see the picture in my head, and I want people to get to know something without necessarily speaking so much. But I sort of lay the thing there and expect that it speaks to you. even if you don't understand it at that moment, it will surely come to be understood. And that is how I go about my work. With this type of thing, I was having well, you get some problems in the conventional art institution when things must be understood and you must see things in the normal light, and so you have problems. But we were also told in school that an artist is someone who remains true to himself. So I decided to remain true to myself and speak so that even if my people don't hear it presently, they would get to hear it later. During my thesis in the university, I did an installation called Statements, and I think that is one of my loudest voices so far. Statements is a comment in 3 parts on, first, education in Ghana. The second part is on the Ghanaian economic policies since independence, and then the third part was on AIDS. Now the first part on education, I laid 100 thesis books. You know, in the university you write thesis and it's bound into a book. And I took them from the shelves in the libraries because I had the thesis that I had the argument that they were not being read. They were just being kept in the libraries to gather dust. So I decided to create a new library on the grass. And so I laid the 100 thesis books out on the grass. And apparently people came to see what was there. So then I think I was justified in a way that when they are kept locked up in a library, you don't read from them, but the books are meant to be read. And then the second part was painting of 50 tomato crates. You know tomato crates, what the market women used to say, cut their book. I painted slogans and ideas from the economic policies, like ERP, Operation Feed Yourself. And these are things we got to know in history. And so I wrote them on the tomato boxes because tomato boxes were to me a symbol of the economy of Ghana, because a lot of people in Ghana engage in selling. And so I asked myself, when everybody is selling, who does the buying? And so I put these economic policies, I wrote them, painted them onto the boxes, and then I laid them out. The idea is that we claim to be the land of gold, and yet we go always for loans from the West. And those loans are meant to help us come out of poverty. But at the end of the day, our stomachs are as empty as the empty boxes that were laid out. The third part was called Graveyards in Red, and that was in reaction to the AIDS scare. In 1999, there was a statistic that 200 people a day get infected by the HIV, and that was something serious. So to me, it was a shock, and I wanted to express that shock to people. So I made canvases. Canvases are wood with cloth stretched on it. I guess most of us here are artists. And I painted them in red, various shades of red. The shape of the canvases were rectangular, so it looked like coffins. And I arranged these 200 coffins on the green grass. And I was calling attention to the fact that if we are not careful, that those 200 coffins would multiplicate in the near future. And so in art commenting on the contemporary society, I think that is my aim, that was my aim. And since it was meant for my thesis, at least it was open to the university community for that short time. And I think, well, from my little interaction with the people, the message got across to a few people. But maybe later it will be able to go across others. So far, that's what I've done in the sense of installations. Presently, too, I had the opportunity to go to Berlin. The Goethe Institute sponsored me to go to Berlin for 3 weeks to partake in Mobile Academy. And that was a collection of young artists from all over the world who were creating useless solutions for non-existent problems. That is the slogan, but I think in creating useless solutions for non-existent problems, we're able to create useful solutions for problems that are existing now. Thank you.
all students right there.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Very, very inspiring. Gives us hope for the future that we have such young people coming up. I'm now going to ask Mr. Godfried Donkor. He says here, an artist resident in London, but I know that he's more than that. Much, much, much more than that. And I think it's important that we have someone like Mr. Donkor here because he lives outside Ghana, works outside Ghana, and his work is heavily influenced by his background, both from here and from where he lives. It's a privilege actually to have him here. And I'll ask him to just speak, say everything you want. Go ahead.
Thanks, Seth. I'd like to say thank you for the Contemporary Society for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be here. I'm actually here for a project at the National Theatre, which was an exhibition. It was an exhibition between, it was called Us Two Together. It was between Ghanaian artists and a Nigerian artist. So it's kind of an exhibition commemorating the independence, Nigerian independence. Something that happens every year. So this year I was invited to be the Ghanaian artist participating. As Seth said, I live in London. I was born here in Ghana in '64, and I moved to London when I was 8. So at that time, obviously, I went to school there and didn't know what being an artist was about or what an artist was. All I remember, I think I was good at art. So in the art classes, I found it very easy. And what I used to do is read a lot of comics when I was young. So I used to go to newsagents, the place where they sell the comics, and I'd be sitting there for hours reading these comics. And the guy would say to me, don't you buy them, read them. You read them, you don't buy them, why? And I said, I'm looking for the ones that I can draw from. And he said, why? And I said, well, I like drawing. So he said, bring me your sketchbook, let me see. So I was about 10, and I used to take him my sketchbooks. And so he said to me, okay, so you want to be an artist? And I said, what's an artist? And he said, well, you need to go to art school first. So from that age, about 10, 11, I heard of art schools. So when I went to secondary college, I went to the arts department and said to my tutor, I want to go to art school. So, you know, already I was starting to, from that was my earliest point of realizing that there was such a thing. When I graduated, in '89, I left London and went to Spain and lived in Spain for 2 years. And for me, that was really important because what happened when I was in Spain was I met 2 artists who were kind of established, who took me on as their assistants. And that's how I learned how to run a studio, how to be, you know, how to clean the canvas, how to prepare paint, how to prepare for exhibitions, how to make work in preparation before the artist comes and does his thing. And really I learned about studio craft, about subsequently running my own studio. So after 2 years in Spain, I went back to London and tried to set up a studio. I was very interested this morning to hear the debates that were going on about contemporary art and whether art sells in Ghana, whether there's an art market in Ghana. You know, back in London in '92, we didn't have young artists that were making money. It happened actually in '91, '92. The so-called YBAs, Damien Hirst, Tracy Emin's, and the people now we all know about who've made a name for themselves began with an exhibition in 1990, which subsequently changed the way that art is appreciated in the West, in the sense of young artists were making money from their art. They were making money before they died. And in this group, I mean, they weren't the first group, but the first group I think was Jean-Michel Basquiat and Schnabels in New York in the 80s. So the London guys in the 90s based themselves on the New York guys in the 80s, and they were determined to make money in their 30s. They are now selling work for millions of pounds, and they are in their 30s, coming up to their late 30s. So we have artist millionaires in pounds, in euros, in dollars, who are very young. So I want to say that if Ghana doesn't yet have that, it will come. But it only happened in Europe in the 90s. And this kind of inspires me, because I didn't want to die and then leave my art to people to make money off. You know, I want to have my family and I want to enjoy my life. I want to also make my art. Someone asked me yesterday if I do my art full time. I want to make my art full time. You know, I want to go to my studio every day. I want to be able to like spend 8 hours or 10 hours in my studio every day. I call it playing when I'm in my studio. So I want to play in my studio every day, and then go home, pay my rent, have my food, have my family. It's a lot to ask for actually, but then again, it's not. You know, and to do that, I think one has to be lucky. One has to work hard. One has to like work without thinking about whether you're going to make money out of it, which is very hard to do. You have to be lucky because we need people like Mr. Dei around who can occasionally come to the studio. And we, you know, I think the fact that we don't give up hope, we have the heart to just go to the studio. I mean, when I came back in London in '92, I made myself have a studio, and then sometimes I'll be working, so I'll go to my studio weekends. Then I'll produce very little work. If I went to my studio every day for a week, I saw that I produced more work, but then I didn't have any money to pay my bills. So you have to kind of balance things out continuously. You need the support of your family, which I've had, so I'm very lucky for that. Sometimes my sister bails me out, my mum bails me out, my brothers bails me out. You need the support of your community, which is important, which I've had, so I'm very lucky for that too. You know, one of the reasons I keep coming back and doing projects here is also, you know, I've been collaborating with Leroy Kubaji at Suffolk Gallery for about 14 years when he was based in London. And for me, it's very important that he supported me when I was a young artist. So apart from the chance to come back to Ghana, I always like to come and collaborate with him when I can. So just to finish off, I don't want to go on too much because we're going to have a debate about it, but I want to say that there is, as long as we are willing to go to our studios and play and work, that's the hope that we have to produce a contemporary art society and a contemporary art scene, because we do have it. I mean, I see it every day when I walk around. I see it every day with the language. I see it every day, I hear it, I smell it. So, you know, it's a question of just, you know, keeping it going. Thank you very much.
I told you it was a privilege to have Mr. Donkor here. And I think in a very short few minutes he's given all of us, especially the artists, the up-and-coming artists, what to do. He said one thing which hit me, is that he actually knew at a very young age that he wanted to be an artist. And unfortunately, in our educational system here, it's like when you cannot be a scientist, etc., they say, okay, go and do arts. It's almost like we tend to think of artists as those people who cannot do anything else. It's the other way around in the rest of the world. And thank you very much for pointing that out. I'd like to call on Leslie, architect and author.
Thank you. When Virginia first sent me an invitation to speak at this event, I was particularly taken with the title, Facing the Mirror, and found it both challenging and poetic to think about contemporary art, in fact all art production in Ghana, in terms of the very powerful image of ourselves facing our own image or images. As a woman, and possibly therefore to a greater extent, I have a long-standing relationship with mirrors, to my own face staring back at me every morning in preparation for meeting the world outside my bathroom and my front door, although this is probably the subject of another slightly different discussion. In terms of today's talk, I imagine that the purpose of getting each of the panelists here today to give a very brief introduction in response to the question of whether contemporary art reflects contemporary society is to set out a small area of concern or interest, which may be picked up later in the more general discussion. In a way, the problem for me will be to limit myself to one or two small areas. The topic we have gathered here today to discuss is so varied, so vast, and so vital that 5 or 10 minutes will absolutely do it no justice at all. But I am an architect after all, and perhaps I will fall back on architecture's possibly most famous maxim, less is sometimes more. I would like to raise two issues, not necessarily questions, but two small descriptions of an attitude towards the arts, not just the fine or visual arts, such as painting, sculpture, installation, photography, etc., but to the whole and full range of artistic production, which includes my own discipline, architecture, and encompasses the literary and performing arts like music, fiction, dance, theatre, etc., what we might call cultural production. The first issue I'd like to raise addresses not just contemporary art, which I feel bound to confess I know very little about, but places art in its more overtly political relationship to culture, and by extension to society, particularly to this society's, ours. What is art for? In 1865, John Bright, the Member of Parliament for Birmingham in the United Kingdom, answered the question by saying, well, not much. It wasn't art that built the great industrial towns, laid the railways, expanded the empire, and made Britain great amongst world nations. In 2004, in Ghana, we might argue the same point. Art did not dismantle the empire, bring an end to British rule, keep the IMF from the door, or prevent a single coup. A few years after Bright's statement, Professor Matthew Arnold of Oxford University was so provoked by his dismissal of the role and importance of the arts that he published a slim volume entitled Culture and Anarchy, in which he argued, as I do here, that art was and is capable of presenting us with nothing less than a clearer, more accurate interpretation of ourselves. An image in the mirror that shows us not just who or what we are, early morning bags under our eyes and teeth in need of brushing, but who we might be, who we might become. This, I would argue, is the fundamental purpose of art, a space, both physical and metaphorical, outside the deficiencies and hardships of everyday life, that encourages us to reflect not only on our present condition, but on other, dreamed of, more meaningful ones. To use whatever understanding we may acquire about ourselves to spur us on to greater achievements, keeping those achievements within the context and integrity of our times. We, as philosopher de Botton writes, are fallen creatures, in permanent danger of worshipping false gods, of failing to understand ourselves, or misinterpreting the behavior of others, of growing over-anxious or covetous, and of losing ourselves to vanity and to error. One of art's many functions is as a vehicle to explain our own condition to ourselves, acting as guides to a truer, more judicious, and possibly more intelligent understanding of the world. And as the world around us grows ever more conservative, technological, and aggressive, we would do well to remember that science and technology have created progress and destruction in almost equal measure. The same cannot be said of the arts. The 20th century, as Isaiah Berlin said before his death, has been the bloodiest and most brutal in the history of mankind. The second very brief issue I have for today's discussion comes from a much more anecdotal source, from a conversation with an ex-student of mine, incidentally a Ghanaian student studying architecture in London a few years ago. During one of our tutorial discussions, I made the point that poetry is perhaps the most difficult of all the arts that are related to language, novels, plays, films, etc., as the task of poetry is to make the maximum impact with the most minimal means. In a single sentence or well-placed word, a world, quite literally, may be revealed. My student, whose designs tended to hold everything he'd ever learned or seen, was rather annoyed by the analogy and asked me what on earth the point of poetry was. After all, echoing John Bright, poetry never put food on anyone's table or paid a water bill. And yet I do believe this is true. Poets are the first people to be locked up in times of revolution or enormous political change. From Argentina to Russia to Nigeria to Angola to South Africa, regimes, particularly those of a repressive or corrupt nature, fear poets and artists. I wonder why. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Now, that's how I've always wanted to describe why I like art. And you work in a way I couldn't put. Very nice. I'm sure we've really provoked a lot of people to ask many questions. Our last speaker is Kofi Setordji, whom I have personally known for a long time. What I can say is that he is serious about his work and prepared to starve for his work. So I give you Kofi Setordji.
I would like to talk about our own self and what artists can give back to society. I've always wondered why people do things. Because I've met my colleagues, rich people, at the age of 80, they are still doing things. And I always wonder why. I started some 27 years ago as a graphic artist. I later went into painting, to sculpture. Today I'm known as a sculptor, not as a painter. I would like to talk about art development. I've passed through some winding roads before I'm standing in front of you today. But I always believe that if we complain about what we saw on the winding road and we leave it as that, then we cannot get anything done. So I've decided that all the things that I've appreciated, I've got out of this winding road, I would like to share this with younger and coming up artists. So I created an artist in residence program called Art House, which is to share techniques, new ways of expressing oneself, because without the knowing of the language of art, if you're a sculptor, you need to understand the material you work with. If you're a painter, you have to understand the paint and the brush, or the hand that you are going to use with it. Because without that, you cannot express yourself very well. It is not very sufficient to say that, well, I've made it, so, well, they can always find their ways. We are talking today that the industry is not good. But we have to look at the industry this way. The artists will always create works, but there are other people who have to stretch the industry, like the writers, the critics, gallery spaces, historians, are very important to move this art world forward. That's why I'm always honored to see Professor Glover building the gallery, because that is one aspect of it. But what about the training? It is not sufficient to go to school and get your degree and that's the end of it. That is why the residency is there, to be able to bring artists from different backgrounds to come to a residency to share knowledge with the on-and-coming artists. Because today when you go to art schools around Accra, I'm sorry to say that, they don't teach them very well, because I don't think they are teaching them very well. Because art is something from within, but you need a language to be able to express yourself very well. And I'm trying to do that by creating this artist in residency, where we've already had one international artist art workshop where we invited artists from Russia, France, Germany, and Japan to be able to work with Ghanaian artists to show them new techniques of seeing how to use the wood, the material wood. Today, working with the Elias Lambert Foundation, we've already secured a scholarship for a young Ghanaian to stay in the artist in residence for 3 months to be able to start an idea and see how you can develop that idea. So this is what I'm working on. Thank you.
I told you he was serious. We're going to have kind of an interactive session coming, but I just wanted to take a few minutes to summarize the high points of each presentation, maybe to remind us, maybe stimulate our minds to ask questions that we may not otherwise ask. I think Renee set the ball rolling by basically saying that art is everything.
art is the totality of life, like this. Jackson showed us a young man who, even at this age, is bold, not afraid to express himself, basically defined to some extent by saying that I know you will eventually understand what I'm trying to say, even if you don't do so at this particular time. Godfried presented another side of it, but it was very clear to him from the very beginning he wanted to be an artist. And he took the initiative to learn what he calls studio craft. And I think it's a very good thing for young artists here to take that into account, because that has been an issue, a problem for artists in their relationship with galleries and management type side of the artist thing. And he talked about the role of the community. It's very important. And we are the community, and we really have to think quite often about the role we play. Leslie, as I said, described everything we're saying in the way I have always hoped I could present English in that sort of way. But it is what it's out for. And the answer seems to be that at the end of everything, it is art which stands. And that it is not easy to do it. People who do it, and there's poetry and others, often have to suffer, struggle. But at the end of it, that is what holds up what society really has achieved. Setordji is a teacher, someone who has perfected his art and decided to pass it on. And all these form part of our community. Again, it is the objective of the foundation to hold such stimulating encounters to the aim of basically promoting contemporary art in Ghana. So I'll now give the floor to you. Now, but first of all, I think we should give our presenters a hand, because now I'll ask the President to take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the floor is open, and anybody, you may address your question to any member of the panel, but first you say your name and who member of the panel you want to address your question to. Otherwise, you're also invited to give your own comments and your own contribution to the debate.
Most of the exhibitions I've been to or heard about have all been, majority been male. I don't know if they could comment on, even if you look at the number of Ghana students that came, the majority of them were also male. They could comment on gender discrepancy in the art scene.
I think it would be good to ask Professor
Yes, if you, well, any question relating to what Keith has raised? Any similar question? So that we have an emeritus professor give us a hand.
Actually, I think it should, well, I would add that it's more than the male gender I noticed here, not in, for example, North America. I think it's more, well, actually, I would like to know if it's more, I think, kind of African, Ghanaian, more than. Here.
It didn't carry.
Yeah, no, I just was mentioning actually that, well, I think in North America, I don't know if it's actually more, I noticed also that it's more the painters are, the artists are male in this country, so I just was wondering if it was African.
Well, I think seemingly,
seemingly looks like there's a sort of shortage of the female participation in the art scene. It's very seeming. It's not so at all. I would say and I've known this for the past maybe 10, 12 years I've been now, that there have been very, very extremely outstanding female artists in this country. Fortunately or unfortunately for us, fortunately for them, immediately they are at the peak of where they should take off, they get married and they are taken away. I can mention Okoti, I can mention Campbell, Ketapia. You see, they are mentioning them. They take off, they are about to take off, then somebody comes to take them off. So that has been.
It's also a piece of art.
That's right. They're also a piece of art. They're a piece of art, somebody comes to buy them. So maybe that's the problem. But otherwise, there have been, and there's still in our university. In fact, yesterday I was on the university. See a lot of female artists, young girls, following the trend, and I believe that we soon will be seeing them on the scene. Thank you very much.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Come over. And your name first.
My name is Kofi. I'm also an up-and-coming artist, like many of us here. Mine is more of a contribution. I think personally the Ghanaian society needs a revolution of mind, first of all. If we are ever going to produce working artists in Ghana, the Ghanaian community itself needs to have a revolution of mind towards art. Because eventually who are we doing the work for? We might as well just do it and keep it in our houses. I can bet you there are young artists here who have had at work as far back as 1985. They still have works lining up. What happens to all this work? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to sell it? But at the end of the day, we really can't do much if that mentality still stays. Thank you.
It's getting more provocative. And I think I'll take his question and try to nibble around the cake a bit. Having been in the museum and having been working in the cultural scene for a while, I would say that the civil society is docile and the civil societies may be dormant. Because in Ghana, the National Museum is one day older than the nation. It means that the founding fathers in their struggle towards independence laid so much emphasis on the importance of culture, and so it might have taken 2-3 years to plan and build the National Museum and have it inaugurated before the flag was run up the post and the national anthem was sounded for the first time. Now, the National Museum is as stagnant as you can imagine. We are talking today of contemporary art. Why are we here? Because, as Keith said, exhibitions are poorly attended. As a matter of fact, it tends to look like we hold exhibitions for the expatriate community in the country. Not only that, we said contemporary art. Somebody asked me, what happens to drama? Because he hasn't seen much happening in the National Theatre by way of the dramatic arts too. Well, not only the visual arts that are suffering, but when you go to the theater, you find that we're playing probably to another audience apart from ourselves. The debate continues. Somebody else?
Yes. Godfried wanted to contribute to this.
I just wanted to say that, I mean, by the sign of things, if someone was to walk in here now, they'll be pretty depressed, standing like there's nothing happening. But these kids are still going to art school. Why are they going to art school? Why are they studying art? Why are you studying art if your art is going to pile up and nobody's going to buy it? You're not crazy, I know that. So there is something going on. I mean, that's what I think, because the art schools are full of kids. And this forum is full of kids here. I'm impressed by the amount of students that are here today. I think that this is the future. This is what we have to go towards. And the fact that they're standing up and some of them are talking and some of them are bringing ideas to the table. This doesn't sound like there's nothing going on in contemporary art scene in Ghana.
May I make a comment?
The observation I want to make is that when I was a young man, which was not long ago.
You still are. You still are. You still are.
Each time I visited any Ghanaian embassy, the embassy was full of Ghanaian art. Every Ghanaian ambassador's residence had Ghanaian paintings. This is to say that there was an official policy at that time, just to go along with what Professor Nkrumah said at that time, for the government of the state to allocate certain sums of money for the acquisition of works. First was National Museum, and also for, well, the National Collection, which was distributed around the world. I think other countries do this, and perhaps we can suggest this, that some of these policies be reinstituted. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd just like to say that Seth said before that, if I understood well, Seth, the art, as far as you're concerned, the art buying Ghanaian public is growing.
Okay.
Matt, I don't know if you heard what Matt said this morning, but he said going around talking to some of the galleries, they're talking about between 5 and 10% is Ghanaians buying art. Whatever. But my question is, let's presuppose that at the moment it's mainly young artists or artists in Ghana are going to be mainly supported by an expatriate community. I think that if that is the case, until things change, there's a huge potential space that's not being filled. Because most expatriates that come here don't know what they're looking for, and they're given this formula, which they've been given, and they think that that's what it is, and the artists think that that's all they can do. Whereas probably if a different, more experimental sort of work was put up in the galleries, it would be bought also. And probably that would have the flow-on effect in terms of the Ghanaians seeing the expatriates buying and maybe. I think that probably it works sort of around the other way as well. Thank you.
Yes, Samuel.
Thank you. My name is Samuel Olu. I want to contribute a little bit. I believe it is true that it's difficult, but art scene is growing in Ghana. Why? Because in 1995, 96, when I came out from school, in 1998, many galleries have rejected the type of art that I do. But today, that kind of type of art has been somewhere, somehow emphasized by the senior artists like Kofi Setordji and some of them. Then it is gradually coming to be accepted. So, and I'm very happy. And at our last exhibition this year, some of the senior artists said, we have never seen something like this in Ghana. So I think it is something coming up gradually, and we don't have to be discouraged. And I said, I'm very happy because some artists like that I met in 2002, well, they won prizes, even that I participated, and some came to my studio and they saw what I do, and we participate in same competitions and they won. But it is not the usual art that people have been seeing, but the unusual one, the one which has been rejected in 3 to 4 years ago, today it has been accepted. So I believe that it is growing, it is coming. And maybe we are not selling and being a billionaire today, but I'm very sure that soon it will follow steps and hear what the seniors and our senior brothers and our professors will tell us to do. We can do something. Thank you.
So I just, once again, wanted to say one or two things.
This is the television.
Not sure. Okay, hold on. I want to bring up the issue of pricing. And this is, speaking as a buyer of art, this is addressed really to the young artists. At lunch, Chris and I were talking, and he reminded me that when I bought his painting in 1977, it cost 500 CDs. CD was very strong then. I mean, it was but today, when you go to places like Golden Tulip and you see works by very young and up-and-coming people asking $1,000. Okay. So there is this whole notion of the development of the artist. And so I think there is a need, if Ghanaians are not buying a lot of paintings, some of it has to do with the pricing, okay, especially by up-and-coming artists. And I think an artist, to be successful really, should have a kind of home audience, people who know him at home, who can testify for him anywhere on the planet. But some of the young artists want to just jump sky high, and their works get either not bought or taken away, but at home they are not known. And some of them actually just don't want to show their paintings anywhere except where you have diplomats and experts. Okay. That is a point I have to make because I see it all the time.
I don't want to get too far off the subject. I just want to interject something here about, I mean, somehow, I know that the art scene, buying and selling is important. I guess it's the educator in me that thinks of art, the world of art, that creative energy, that imaginative instinct that has the power, in fact, to transform societies. You know, that empowerment that makes a young person believe that they can transform any body information and actually, you know, extend the parameters of what's possible across the world and the life we live in. I mean, I think it's clear we're talking about visual arts here, but I also think we need to think of art in a more dynamic way. In part, the idea of extending that landscape of possibility that an artistic mind makes possible might help create a class of people that can afford art. So I'd like to think of somehow having more pulsating discourse around artistic imagination. You know, I always think of art as, when you talk about art being the sum total of the best of what people have to offer. You know, the arts, it's really about hearts and minds. It's about movement, it's dynamic. I mean, I'm not sure that it's just what we put on our walls all the time.
I would like to add here that, especially the young artists who are coming up, I would like to say that, have they ever thought of applied art if they want to survive? Actually, I can tell you about my own side because there are 30 times, about 2-3 years, I don't sell any of my work, but I survive because I collaborate with carpenters to design furniture. Have you ever thought of that? You can collaborate with fabric makers to make fabrics. You can live on that. Because it is very important, because we are talking about art. Art is not necessarily painting on the wall. You can do so many other things, because when you come to my house, I've designed the house, built it myself, all the furniture in it is made by myself. So artists have got all this, so you don't have to look at only painting on the wall or just three-dimensional work as art. There are so many range of applied art that you could go into. You could go to ceramics, you could go to look at Picasso. Picasso did all that to survive. So why can't you do this? Huh?
About applied arts, I also belong to a Christian group called Christ at Work. And Christ at Work was formed when we were in Tech, UST. And it was mainly made up of students in the College of Art, but of various departments. So I was from painting, another from ceramics, and another from textiles. When we come together, we create plays and performances for churches or for the public. And each person brings in his expertise in a way, like if you're a painter, then you create maybe the set or something. So we are coming together as a collective, because right now we realize that it's the thing in the art world now is collectives. So artists, I think it's good, young artists, we start forming collectives, because our voice is louder when we are a group. And that's why it's good to have such a group as we have now. And then talking about pricing, sometimes it's not the fault of the young artists to maybe overprice their works. Sometimes they think of the price of the material in the first place. When you're talking about painting, you have to paint in oils. Then oils cost a lot. And the student doesn't get the oils for free. Gone were the days in the College of Arts when we even had materials. These days we buy our own materials. We struggle for accommodation and other things, even on campus. And that's why sometimes it trickles into our pricing. So it's not our fault. Forgive us when we overprice.
Carrying on for the point that Kofi just made and Renee was talking about, really this is it. It's when the environment seems dormant, that's when the most creativity is happening underground. And I know that that's the case. It's just a question of when that creativity is going to become collective, so it explodes. That's what happens. So the creativity is there. Everybody's thinking, well, how am I going to sell this work? How am I going to make this piece? How am I going to make this piece of work? How am I going to understand conceptual art? How am I going to be more conceptual? How am I going to be more contemporary? These questions are being asked all the time. I know that here. It's just a question of time to when enough people are going to be asking the same question at the same time, and something is going to happen. And so we need to just continue to ask these questions and continue to kind of participate in the debate. Just to talk about pricing briefly, I mean, I think this is a problem everywhere. It's universal. If you, depending on where you live and depending on where the collector comes from, your price goes accordingly. If I have a German collector come to my studio, the price changes. If I have an American collector, it changes. If I have a Ghanaian collector, it changes. Today, in fact, I got an email from a Brussels gallery I'm working with, and the price I gave him was too high for Belgium. So I have to come down to Brussels price. And this is Europe. So, you know, literally, this is what happens every day. So, you know, depending on what, I would say, depending on what clothes the collector's wearing, you change your price accordingly. If he's wearing flip-flops.
So now I know how to correct.
Yes, I think.
I would just like to say something about education. I think it's the educator side of the panel.